18th, 2024 minutes.
So moved.
Second.
So Kelly Allen moved, Eric Wade second. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Public comment, does anybody from the public want to? Okay, seeing no. Is the next one athletic?
It's
So
the
it's supposed to be
budget.
added in your online, but,
So it's the budget review, and as part of that, we have Kevin as requested to come speak about the athletics requests.
Kevin, you want to come on up and
Sure.
watch my cord, don't trip and fall.
I'm a football coach, so I don't have the most of the
Make sure you speak loud.
Absolutely.
Speak loud.
Good evening. I know most of you, but there are some new board members. I just wanted to quickly introduce myself. Kevin Hebert, been the athletic director at Spalding and Rochester Middle School for the past 14 years. On top of that, I also coach, I'm the head football coach here, and I have the pleasure of being the president of the Division I Athletic Directors Association, so I represent all the big schools in our state. I also sit on 4 committees for the NHIAA, which is our governing body at the state level, and I also happen to be the chair of the Sports Officiating Committee, which is kind of a fun one to be a part of right now, given everything that's happening. I wanted to quickly start before budget and just make a note that I was very proud of our entire community last week, which feels like 3 or 4 months ago now, with our hockey team in our community. I mean, it was amazing to see the outpouring of support for those student athletes in our program. And I know many of you were at that game, and many of you were in a lot of games this winter. And I would be remiss to not mention that that was certainly a pinnacle of our winter season. It really was amazing. And congratulations to Mr. Pappas as well with his school. Friendly accolades to you and your program.
Thank you.
So I wanted to discuss the budget, a couple of items in regards to the first one being ice hockey dues and fees. So we talked a little bit about this last year. There was an increase in the rates of the ice hockey. Basically, to produce the ice, the electricity, the facility went up 4%. They're going up another 4% this year. I believe Dr. Bryant provided you with a bulleted list. So one of the things I'm looking for is to increase that dues and fees line for ice hockey by $5,000, which would cover the 8% increase, 4% from this past season and the next 4% for next year. And that obviously will be a cost that will be at least at that level, if not more, to suffice that ice increase. And then the other piece was I was asked to kind of look at the schools, or the programs that do a lot of fundraising and really where there's need. And if you look, really hockey is kind of the outlier. They have to raise anywhere between $15,000 and $17,000 just to get the team on the ice. So we contribute monies to that, and then the booster group obviously has to cover the difference. So one of the reasons that increase would be asked for is it would really bring us almost in line with boosters to providing almost half of what the total ice bill is at the end of the season. And so when we made a deep run like we did this year, we incurred another 3 weeks of ice costs, or 2.5 weeks of ice costs, which is a great thing, obviously, for our program, but obviously that does have some additional cost to it. So really what I'm looking for, if we could, is a recommendation to look at a general $10,000 increase. And a lot of those lines that I mentioned, hockey, football, lacrosse, basketball, softball, a lot of those organizations do a lot of fundraising. One of the things I think would be good if we could is to kind of put that into more of a general line, like our general line. So last year we had wrestling mats that came forward. There are costs that sometimes come up in athletics, scoreboards that aren't really foreseeable. Then there's ones like old equipment that we can kind of see coming. I mentioned on there that uniforms tend to be a variable, where sometimes we have everyone on the cycle, and then through wear and tear or whatever sports there may be, there could be a need faster. So this would kind of give us the flexibility to kind of put that money to really where the budget would need it. And then the second piece I wanted to mention, and I'll take questions on both, is our athletic training services. I know most of you and you all met John a few months ago at your board meeting. And again, I would be remiss to not mention that in saving that young man's life was really an amazing thing, and his family is so grateful. He's part of Mass General Brigham's, who owns our athletic contract. It used to be Rehab 3, And then they were bought out by Wentworth Douglas and Frisbee Hospital, and long story short, now Mass General Brigham's owns all of those hospitals. Really, in Massachusetts and Connecticut, there's a really high cost for athletic training services. So in all my years here, with the exception of a few, we've paid $0 for this training. We did have a year where Access Sports Medicine came in with a bid, and then we ended up going back to, the next bid later, back to Wentworth Douglas at the time. But in essence, once we came back, we were really put at a $0 figure. So we've been getting our trainer basically for free, essentially. And I've been here for 14 years, and I know that Dave Colson before me for 10. And so it's been a few $1,000s or really minimal cost. In Massachusetts, some of those schools are paying $80,000 to $90,000 for a trainer. Obviously, some of their districts have a little bit more financial means. But what Mass General is trying to do is bring everyone up to somewhat of a playing field. Not so much an even playing field or a level playing field, but what they're looking at, and I put the structure here, is they were looking for $30,000 next year, $45,000 the year after that, and then $60,000 in year 3. So what they do is they have what's called a fair market value. It's similar to, from what I understand, to like real estate, a fair market value for the service. So one of the things, we're in an agreement with them now, and they've been very, very good about being able to kind of speak to this, and I've kind of shared with them that obviously those kind of costs for our district would be pretty tough for us to take. So they've agreed next year to really a fee of $2,250, $2,200 to have service. Their big thing is they understand our situation, they know our budget's pretty much finalized, but they also would like to try to see if we can make some sort of a long-term commitment. So what I did was I put the projected numbers there so you could see what they were asking for starting next year. We've already kind of made a verbal agreement with them to be at $2,200 for next year. But really it's going to be eventually a cost that we're probably going to have to look to build into our budget. Obviously being a Division I school with 57 programs, he's instrumental in what we do operationally, practice-wise and game-wise. So those are kind of some of the budget items I just wanted to bring forward for consideration, and I certainly will answer any questions you may have.
Does anybody have any questions? No.
Thank you. This is in addition to what has already been presented to the board.
That's correct.
And is there a different line item, Sam, for the athletic training that will be created? Or are you going to put that in with it?
I'm sorry, what was the question?
For the athletic trainer, is that a new line item, or are we really putting that under administrative services or something?
It's not in the budget for next year, it's its own item.
So that's why,
We can add it.
category you're going to put in, or you're going to add a new item?
We could add a new item.
Yes, Eric?
Kevin, thanks for coming this evening.
Sure.
So we got an email several weeks ago from one of our constituents regarding cheer. So what's the current line item budget for cheer as far as how much they're receiving?
Total dollars, I'd have to go look at it, and I think Ms. Kelly may have that number. I can tell you that there are some sports like cheering.
Yep.
So we haven't really, just historically, we haven't increased this budget. In the 14 years I've been here, it's been pretty leveled. Spirit in particular has a lot of competitions. And so when those competitions come judges, or when those judges come costs and fees. Outside of those things, minus uniforms, they're not a tremendous cost. They don't take a lot of buses unless they travel to away games. A lot of times what we do is we have to try to find money for them to move into that line specifically for competitions. I don't have the number off the top of my head, but I can tell you just from experience in doing this, I always buffer a little bit of money knowing that there's probably not enough in their dues and fees to put that in there when they do it in their competition. So they usually go to 2 or 3 comps in the winter. The fall is a couple of competitions, and they have their big state meet. The state meet's free. It's the invitational ones that have a fee.
And they're doing a lot of fundraising.
They're doing a lot of fundraising as well. So that's another group that I would say is in that area of, as far as like just need. It'd be great to be able to say, hey, you want to go to this competition? It's $400 to get in. Great, here we go. Track tends to be another one like that. Wrestling's another one. So anytime there's invitational meets where they're inviting multiple schools, incurring multiple officials costs, there's an entry fee, I guess, for a lack of a better term. So for the cheering ones, there tends to be.
Were you looking for the full budget for Spirit or just dues and fees?
Full budget.
Full
What
budget.
the line item is for them.
For FY24, their full budget is $13,892.
Okay, thank you.
And that is 2 seasons, by the way. So it's fall and winter.
Thanks.
Yep.
Matt, go ahead, and then Augustine.
In the thank you, Kevin. In the topic of sports teams that are looking for funding, I'm just curious what our middle school baseball and softball
Yeah.
costs are and what do we
Great
provide?
question.
And
So just to get the new board members up to speed, there's been a lot of sports added at the middle school level at $0, which means we've added the sport, but we haven't funded it. So one of the things I think may be worthwhile moving forward is a committee to look at, especially the sports that have been there for a while. The numbers are increased, baseball, softball, those programs don't receive funding. That being said, all of those teams have to raise whatever dollars they're raising to operate. But because we can't fund it by the school, we really can't supply any budgetary things. Sometimes I'll try to get fields lined that are gonna be lined for high school and middle school, so the coach isn't out there themselves, but there's a lot of times our volunteer middle school coaches are actually out lining their own field. So it is another area of need, I think, that as middle school sports become more popular and get larger, in fact, Ms. Stokes, I believe, son was part of the first baseball program.
Yes, we were.
It's great that we added these. The challenge to it is it's very hard to keep a coach and motivated parents, and as kids get older, there's it gets tougher to ask everyone to fundraise for everything, including like an official. But yeah, that would be another area that if we could, I certainly would love to consider doing that.
May I ask another question?
Yep.
Thank you for that. I assume that there are other sports too that are zero funded, maybe in the fall as well, or?
Yeah, so for middle school, it's baseball, softball, it is both soccer teams that we added. Just going through my mental Rolodex here.
This might be something that we probably want him to be able to have time to put together
Yeah.
and then kind of
This is
discuss
true.
what he might think for an increase, because I think our stipends are really low as well. So maybe give him some time to kind of put together, if we had a budget for next year, who I'd like to start paying and how I'd like to increase some of the stipends. Because we increased it a while ago, but it wasn't even comparable to the other cities and towns.
Yeah, the board was gracious enough to add a $20,000 increment to that. I think pre-COVID, the whole was to look at another 20. And what we did the first time around was really brought the head coaching positions up because they needed it, and then look at maybe an additional 20 to look at the assistant positions. But for the middle school, if they're not funded, obviously they're not receiving anything. They're all voluntary.
Would you be in support of having him come back and present that?
Maybe eventually. I think we gotta get through budget first, but
Right.
maybe,
So
as you
can we just
mentioned,
look
the
at that
ad
in the
hoc
future?
committee, maybe down the road to look at this.
Steve and then.
That's what I was gonna say, if you could bring back maybe a projection for the 26 year budget way ahead of time so we can get it in, including the middle school, what you actually need for what programs.
Yep.
Basically everything you would need.
Okay.
And then my other thing is have you reached out to Mass General? And if you do the quick math, we're talking 135,000 over 3 years. What would it be if we signed a multi-year contract and reduced that price?
Yeah, so this is what they call their basic proposal. There have been some schools that have upped that years. There's been others that have been able to take that number. They have been very good about, they're not firm numbers. They understand that every district's in a different spot. So I think, again, and Mr. Patrici would know more about the contract language piece, but my understanding, because we have an existing contract, we can continue the contract. And then if we decide that we want to spread it out over 5 years versus the 3, that's something we can talk to them about. They have been very, very good, and I will say that when one of our athletes is hurt, not only does John, our trainer, assess those injuries, as far as getting them evaluated in orthopedics and surgery, it is, we all know getting into an appointment right now is, he can get them in extremely fast because obviously he's within the network. So there is a holistic piece of this that if a student athlete needs surgery, that they're gonna get expedited versus someone else.
But I gotta say, with you coaching two of my boys, he has jumped hoops and he doesn't just stop when they leave the school and they're being seen. He follows up continuously, including with the parents. He's amazing.
Yep.
And then my last question is, do you really think if we're sitting down here making cuts and expanding other things, is 15 enough? Because the sports athletics programs keeps kids out of other things. Is 15 enough? or do we need to look at a better number?
You know, I looked at, obviously, you all had some tough decisions to make with getting the budget, under budget, given all the cuts. And, you know, one of the things I look at is from a realistic approach of what we need versus what we want. And I always use the expression, we're not taking limousines to games, we're taking school buses. I think this is a start, and I think looking at some of the middle school pieces, I know in the past we've talked about some gate revenue, some of the police details that we have to also incur. So for also all of our home games, we have to incur some city charter costs that really are out of our control. Those are some variables that I think if we could reduce some of those or get some savings from those and then apply those to the budget, like the gate receipts or some police details, I think that would help offset costs. But those are city charter issues as well. And if I just add one more thing to Mr. Cusimano's, I think the hard part is when a major item breaks in the middle of a budget and we don't have the money to get it. That's where, like if a scoreboard breaks down, I can't function without a scoreboard. That's the piece that right now we don't really have, and I have to literally grab money from a bunch of sports to try to, if an ice machine breaks, those kind of things. So the big ticket items when they go is the tough part, because I don't have a CIP or anything.
So I just got a couple things. We have a lot of new board members. So last year, this board approved, which was great, brand new uniforms for the band. And that was a pricey ticket. This year, I know the band came forward and now they need, or they wanted instruments, and I think that's in the budget. Kevin said he's been here 14 years and his budget hasn't moved. So I think we really need to think about doing something. And I know I just found out recently that all the money at the gate goes right to the city, because it's in the charter. So I think that's something that we need to talk with city about. Our athletic department is bringing that money to the gate. I think we need to see if that can get changed. We know we're gonna have to replace that track. So I think that's something we need to work with the city about, maybe getting that out of the charter for us, for that money to go to our athletic department.
And just so you know, just because I did the research on it, it's about anywhere between $9,000 to $10,000 a year. So again, when that contingency item needs a repair or a replacement, it's that kind of dollars that we're looking at.
So, Mrs. Stokes, if you can possibly talk to somebody from the city and do something. Or I can reach out to somebody.
Kyle, can you just let me know who I would reach out to?
Well, with the city charter thing, I think it would probably be best for our board chair to talk to the mayor, because it's a city charter that is not something I have the purview, or even one person on this board is the purview. So maybe you could add that to the list when you talk about the capital reserve fund too.
Kelly, because Eric's already gone, sorry, go ahead, Kelly.
The gate fee too, and same with hockey, I believe. when
Yes,
they go
so-
up.
So right now,
The
any
gate at the door.
gates that come in for games do not come back to athletics, they do not come back to the
Right.
school, they go back to the city. And we do incur a small cost even to have ticket takers for those things and those, so it actually costs us money, believe it or not,
Yeah,
and the officials, but that's another thing. Like, it costs us a few bucks to actually put games on.
yeah.
But
And I
yes.
just thought it would be nice if the sport, my son played hockey, and I was thought, great to go back to the sport.
Yep.
Eric.
So we pay the detail rate for the officers.
That's correct.
How much are we budgeting for that?
Yep, great question. So I did the homework on that as well. So this past year, for police detail, we paid, so we just wrapped up football. So the sports that are required for police detail in the charter are football, basketball, and ice hockey. And that includes both boys and girls basketball. So we're looking at about 18 games. So the total cost for this year is going to be approximately $11,200.
And our gate takes in, you said about 9 to 10.
And our gate takes in anywhere between 9 to 10, depending, and that depends really upon how the teams are doing. So obviously, like this year with hockey, we had a lot more people than we would if hockey had struggled. But yes, yeah, so it's about 20,000.
That's perfect, if you're speaking to the mayor. Our gate can basically cover the detail officer rate.
Do we have the money, I know that this was presented beforehand, so do we have it? Can we figure out where to find the,
The 15,000?
yeah.
I mean, I'm sure just historically where we have had surplus, it's not a huge amount.
Okay.
I'm sure there's a way to find it.
I think being on this board, sorry, I think being on this board for the number of years, I remember when the stipends were brought up and we had talked about increasing it and then increasing it in the future and then we never did. I understand where you kind of brought up the band thing, and I look at them as two separate. I think we need to support the band and I think we need to support the athletics, and I think that Kevin's really proud of himself for keeping the budget where it is, but I think we're a Division I school. It was brought up during election that, you know, we want to increase some of the things that are in our school to include like lockers and stuff, and I think if Kevin had a budget that was higher, he could make those. I also think when you're talking about a D1 school and kids going to college, my son being one of them, to play a sport, you really want some good coaches, and we're not paying your assistant coaches anything. There's been times where this board has struggled with even finding a coach that would take it on. So I think those are things that we really need to look at, because we do have a really good athletic program, but we don't really financially support it, I think, as great as we could. So I would think after the budget, having Kevin come back and kind of going over the stipends and like who gets paid and who is volunteer, and looking at that would be important, but that would be an after budget thing. Mr. Pappas?
Thank you. Kevin, seeing you're here, I'm going to ask a question too.
Sure.
Because I don't get to ask this question very often. I did look at the stipend list not too long ago, and I'm just curious, do those stay the same until we decide to change them, or are they adjusted for inflation at all?
Yeah, so it's a collective bargaining piece. I think one of the things that was brought up at the previous board was, you know, maybe perhaps looking at, do we take these out of collective bargaining themselves? When the increase was made, that was the conversation. But they are collectively bargained. I try to provide data to the teachers union in regards to where we're at versus where other schools are at. And again, I'm not part of those negotiations. So really whatever comes from those contract negotiations is kind of what we have for a pool of money.
Okay, so it isn't necessarily an automatic increase because of the cost of living?
That's correct. There's no built-in, like some contracts have, they're similar to teachers' contract with steps. Right now for athletics, there's no step increases. So when we did increase them, they had not been increased over those years. So there's no cost of living, there's no like step, there's not a fifth-year coach doesn't make, they make the same as a 25th-year coach would.
Okay, may I ask one more question?
Yep.
On that, do you have any idea how many of our coaches are teachers?
Yeah, I want to say it's somewhere between 40 and 45%. The numbers come down a little bit, but there's, it actually might have gone up within the recent years, because we've had some teachers jump in actually just recently this spring. I will tell you, our educators are great. I call it with the bailout factor. When we don't have a coach, it's usually I'm finding a teacher. So it's I can get that number for you now.
Okay, no rush.
Yep,
Thank
sure.
you, appreciate it.
Yes, Shawnee?
So I just have a question about cheering and their budget. We had received an email from a parent. Do you know what shape those mats are in? Like, do they need to be thought about as being replaced as part of the budget for this year?
I can tell you that there have been some replaced. There's practice mats and competition mats. The difference is the competition mats, we don't host any meets. So I would have to confer with people that are a little bit more qualified, probably my cheer coaches, to kind of see what's in good shape, what's in shape of
Okay.
need. But we have replaced some of those. They're very similar to wrestling mats in that they come in sections and they're not cheap. So we, again, as I look at the spirit budget, if I can grab a mat that year when they're not doing uniforms, is kind of how we have offset it. But I can certainly get that information back to you after speaking with them.
Okay.
They haven't brought any real dire, like, Mr. Hebel, we need these replaced, but sometimes I'll be the first to say I'm the last to know.
Okay.
But I can certainly get the status.
All right, cool, thank you.
Yeah, of course.
So would we need a motion to increase the special service budget? So would anybody like to make that motion?
Yep.
Yes, Mr. Pappas?
I'd like to increase, make a motion to increase the special services budget by $15,000 for athletics.
So Matt Pappas motioned, Kelly Allen second. Any discussion?
Do we think 15 is enough? I know we are under constraint, but athletics is a big thing. Should we go to 20? Because if the numbers are right in this thing, we're only 141,876 for athletics for the year.
And also, I think we're looking at potentially that 2,250 as well for the.
So would you make the amendment to add the
Up at the 22,000.
17,250?
Sure, for discussion, we'll talk about it.
So the new motion would be to add the 2,250, to be 17,250?
Yeah, Kelly has to agree.
I second that.
You're, okay. I think the thing is, Mr. Cusimano, I think we know we have an end of the year, if we have any surplus, I think asking Kevin if there's any mats or anything he can quickly purchase. I think he's hearing us, so I think he's probably gonna have a list ready if there's any additional funds at the end of the year, and I think maybe looking at the 17,250, having a list of things he might need, so that way if there's any extra funds, Allison, at the end of the year, we understand that cheerleading mats or anything that could potentially be purchased ahead of time for any sport for next year, so that he has a little bit of a surplus, would be really important. I think this committee would be in favor of that. Would that, okay, yes, Ms.
I
Allen?
think it's a good jump start, plus you're going to look into talking to the city about the door fees.
And I think after the budget season, having them come back and talk about the stipends and the comparison and giving them some time to get that together would, I think, also be important for us to look at for next year's budget. So is there any other discussion? Yes, Mr. Pappas?
Mr. Pusey, by increasing this by that amount, does that mean that puts us over the tax cap budget?
It does. So basically what I was going to say before you make the final motion is that you would instruct us to find it within the 270 that you permitted us to use, which, again, you're going to hear more about shortly when Ms. Kelly presents the final budget and finance. So you can make a motion now to do that, and then in finance, you can figure out how to pay for it.
Okay.
Okay.
I love it. We get to increase it and then somebody else gets to figure out how to pay
Exactly.
for it. That's my household expenses right there. So, any other discussion? All those in favor?
I got a quick,
Oh, sorry, I didn't see your hand
no,
raised, sorry.
that's fine. No. So, this is more of a procedural question, I guess, but whereas
Sorry, hold on.
we have to have a contract now for Moose, is that an extension of an existing contract, or God forbid we gotta go out for bid for that?
And again, I don't want to speak for
No, go
Mr.
ahead.
Pusey, but from what I've been told, because we have a contract with them currently, we can extend it for a year. And then we're going to have to probably take a look at the next 3-year piece, what that may look like, whether it is an extension or a bid process or what have you. And again, I think they are looking for some sort of more of a verbal commitment from us that we're in this for the long haul.
Right.
But again,
But we haven't,
well,
and what prompts me to ask the question is we have not expended money on this. Now we're gonna have to start expending money in the proposal, in 3 years out, we're gonna be spending 60,000. Does that prompt a need for going out to bid?
The current contract that we have right now is for $0.
Right.
So next year's, because it's going to expire, they're going to send Kevin something to consider. This is well beneath the bidding requirement, so we could enter into that with our signatures here. It's really when you start talking about 30,000 that we're going to have to go out for sealed bid.
Right.
And ask other folks, but as Kevin said, I mean, I don't want to speak for all the other hospitals, but it really is a one-man or woman show at this point.
Right.
There aren't a lot of other shops to consider this, so they're probably going to be the sole bidder. And they're trying to work, as Kevin said, we're not the only district in this position. When you think about a district smaller than us, they're probably going to get that same number. They're trying to work with them, but they also have to pay their people.
And I understand that, again, it's a procedural, when we start, because we have been 0, and we start adding numbers in, it starts triggering other issues.
I put as the to-do list for Kevin, just basically get out to bid before summer starts, because we want to really start to say, before you get to budget season next year, you have all those bids to consider, and then you pick someone before you get to this month, the year next year.
Yeah. All right.
Right,
Thank you.
Sorry, and I'm
No,
sorry I didn't see you.
No, that's
so-
fine,
Sarah, I don't see you, but, okay. Any other questions? All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Ayes have it.
Thank you.
No, you're
Thanks
very
on behalf
welcome.
of
Thank you for
everybody.
coming. Do we have any other? Yes.
I'm not sure if this is the appropriate committee, but, because I see that food services has its own line, but is this the committee where we might invite someone in to give us an overview of the food service program and the goals and how it's funded and who's making decisions
Yep.
about that? Can we do that in upcoming
Yeah,
meetings?
I think Allison can schedule that after the budget system, yeah.
Thank you.
Perfect. Any other questions or comments? All right, motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Matt Pappas, do I have a second? Eric White, second? All right, motion, any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.